Welcome to Shawn Levy. Shawn, tell us about yourself and what you have to do with MLS.
I've lived in Portland since 1992. I'm an author, a former film critic for the daily newspaper here and for one of the TV stations. And I started attending Timbers matches in 2001. There hadn't been a Timbers team for a few years, and they were revived as a second division team. We don't have promotion, but there is a second division.
Right.
United Soccer Leagues at that time, actually a league very briefly.
Yeah.
And during that period, the Timbers Army became a phenomenon, a grassroots supporters section that was very Portland in the Portlandia sense of Portland, very DIY, very creative. We were doing large-scale tifos, bigger than any club in MLS at that time was doing. And we had, by the mid-aughts, a larger supporters section than most MLS clubs.
Wow.
And at around that time, we had the rivals in Seattle and Vancouver. And my rowdy friends and I thought, well, we don't want to. Seattle was given an MLS franchise. We were not. And we wanted to, rise up to the new major league with them, because if we didn't, our nearest rivals would have been in Minnesota, which is about 1,500 miles away.
Oh, wow.
So, that would have killed the club effectively.
Yeah.
We would have become a regional, sort of training club for high school and college players.
Gosh.
So we organized the Timbers Army into a lobbying group to lobby the city to allow us to convert the stadium, which at that time was shared with a baseball team, into a soccer-only venue. And that was, the Timbers Army, I think of it as several things. One thing it is this rowdy, group of nuts, and this sort of, I coined a phrase that we use, if you want to be Timbers Army, you already are.
Great. I love that.
We also became a lobbying group and effectively then sort of a club with paid membership and officers and committees. And I was involved in all of that. And at the same time, I was also and remain a kind of rowdy in the stands. I was a capo, sort of helping, human metronome in front of the supporters, getting the people in one end of the supporter section singing what the people in the other end were singing, coordinating with the drums on what would be the next song that we sang. So I've always had a hand in.
That's fantastic. So yeah, this goes back a really long time, because I don't know how much I knew about the history, but I really thought that the MLS start for the Timbers was the start for the Timbers, and obviously I'm way off on that.
No, the club started actually in 1975 in the old NASL.
Gosh.
And that was when I did a history of the Timbers when we were promoted to MLS, or when we were became an MLS side. We did in conjunction with the club a fan's history of the Portland Timbers. I edited it. About a dozen local writers and soccer fans contributed chapters. And one of the things we discovered was in 1975, a sports writer dubbed us Soccer City USA.
Oh, wow.
And we found a photograph of a city councilor giving Vic Crow, the former Aston Villa manager who managed the club back then, a plaque that read Soccer City USA. That NASL era ended within about 5 or 6 years. And then there were a series of very minor league, even indoor soccer clubs calling themselves the Timbers that petered out finally in the early 90s. So there were about 10 years where there was no Timbers. And then when new ownership took over the stadium and renovated it, they decided to bring soccer back. And they consulted with some of the people from the NASL era. And they said, look, if you call it Timbers, you'll get 10,000 people right away, because those people who used to fill the stadium are still here. So we've been the Timbers. Next year will be a 50th anniversary, and been Seattle rivals ever since. Our first ever match in '75 was against Seattle. Our first playoff appearance was that year against Seattle. And, we've it's 50 years. There are people who are, looking at retirement who've grown up hating one another in that rivalry.
That's fantastic. So I was going to say, I was going to ask you when your sort of birth into loving soccer when it began, and I thought it can't have been with Timbers because that was, the discrepancy between them. So set me straight. How did this occur?
For many decades, and I think it's finally changed, soccer was primarily a youth sport in the United States, and both of my sons played soccer. And this is something about the terroir of Pacific Northwest soccer. The boys played in summer camps and in high school, and the coaches in both cases were original members of the 1975 Timbers. Those guys who came from England came to the Northwest and loved it. Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, rather like England in some ways. These were, in Portland, there were primarily Aston Villa and West Ham players. And they just sort of blended into the atmosphere. This has happened, by the way, with our NBA team as well. Young men from the American South or the American Northeast come to Portland and recognize the quality of life. And when they finally retire, this is where they raise their family or come to start businesses. So all those guys from the 75 team stayed here, and they were my son's coaches. And in the late 90s, I always had an interest in world soccer. I had lived in Barcelona after university during the Maradona years, and my family are originally from Naples. So when Maradona went to Napoli, that was I was conscious of that. But in the late 90s, I was working on a project that brought me to London quite often and had to do with the swinging 60s. And I was interviewing people like Terence Stamp, Michael Caine, Vidal Sassoon, and said, hey, what club did you support, by the way? That was a thing, right? And they were like, we were Chelsea supporters. We'd go on a Saturday to the King's Road and walk up, go to Alvaro's and have a meal, and then walk up to the ground and then walk back and, meet the girls. And I thought, well, this is perversely wonderful. The internet was robust enough in the mid 90s that you could follow football from Europe, and follow Barcelona, Napoli, and Chelsea. And I picked up Marseille because I became a fan of blue, corrupt teams. And when the Timbers came in a few years later, my sons were of high school age. They were playing and gobbling up the game. There were some cable broadcasts of live matches and a weekly roundup on Sunday night, sort of a game of match of the day type roundup show that showed the Premier League, La Liga, Ligue 1, Bundesliga, highlights. And it just took. We just became fans. We had a World Cup in 2000, 2004, and we were or 2002, 2006, and we were over the moon.
Fantastic. That's a wonderful history. You've got a really sort of multicultural, multinational sort of time that you've been through there as well. So was it when you moved to Portland that the Timbers influence came and grabbed you?
Well, it was, I moved here in 92. The Timbers revived in 2001. But like I say, I became disenchanted with American sports. I was never a fan really of gridiron football. We didn't have professional baseball in Portland, Major League Baseball. The team I support, the Mets in New York, the Men in Blazers, the soccer podcasters here,
I know them.
They have a catchphrase, "That's so Spurs," and it could be "That's so Mets." The Mets signed a guy to a contract, and the deal was we're going to pay you over 25 years. He wound up being injured, a career-ending injury after 18 months. We're still sending this guy checks. And every year on that day when his check is due, there's usually posts on social media, "Hey, it's Bobby Bonilla Day. That's so Mets." So, to find another sport was always in my mind. And soccer became the one. It opens the world for you in a way that American sports don't. The NBA is doing it now in reverse. There are so many international players, but I don't know anyone in the U.S. who follows, the Spanish or Italian or Greek championships. Whereas I know people who follow football teams in many, many countries. The Africa Cup of Nations is currently running, and I have it on most days when I'm working, with the volume down low, just to have the beauty of the patterns on the pitch as sort of something as wallpaper.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think especially AFCON, it's got a real sort of magic to it. I think there's lots of identity in the crowds and in the teams, and yeah, the whole celebration of it all. It's a really lovely thing to watch, isn't it?
And it's a thing where I've traveled in South America, I've traveled in Europe, meet people from all over the world. When we were in the United States, walked in, I don't know, about 15 years ago, maybe less. I walked into a shop here to get a new passport photo taken, and this young woman was saying, with an accent, was saying to me, "Oh, you can smile. You can't smile in my country's passport." And I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Bulgaria." And for a second, I thought, and I said, "Dmitry Berbatov." She said, "You know Berbatov." So if you follow this game, you have something in common with almost everyone you meet.
It is. It's a real universal language, isn't it? I've done that in other countries as well. Just brought up the football that comes to mind, and then you've already got a bond. It's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So the Timbers Army, how did you get involved with that?
I always claim to be employee number 40 of the Timbers Army.
Yeah.
I recognize who was there in front of me because my sons and I used to sit, like, they were rowdy, but as I say, there were 39 of them. And they would fill the first couple of rows behind the goal in the north end of the stadium. And my sons and I would sit at the top of that section, and you could carry on a conversation at this volume during the match because there were 39 of them. And they didn't have drums. They had old pickle barrels. So, they weren't very resonant. They weren't made to be heard across a vast stadium. And my sons wanted to go hang out near those guys. And I was like, "No, please, those are drunken idiots." And then, within a year, I was sort of the ringleader of the drunken idiots. And as we've grown, we've done things that have always kept me involved. So I mentioned our drive to become an MLS side. During that time, we organized two groups, really three now. The first was sort of the MLS to PDX being the initials of our airport and a nickname for the city.
Right.
So that was a political action committee. And then we organized the 107ist, which is 107 is the section that the Timbers Army sat in, and it's still the center of the supporters section of the stadium, and IST for Independent Supporters Trust. So, that would be a lobbying group. And then we formed a group called Operation Pitch Invasion, which I became one of the board members of. And Pitch Invasion, our mission is to restore, maintain, and build soccer surfaces in parks and schools.
Oh, fantastic.
And we started doing it really in about 2014, started our building project. Since 2014, we've done 7 major $100,000+ projects where we put 2 tennis court size futsal courts side by side in a schoolyard or in a park or next to a community center with a fence around it, thick asphalt, beautiful acrylic paint that will last, the sort that they paint highways with. But we've done another 20 or 25 of what we call Project Blacktop, where for about $5,000-$10,000, we can go into any schoolyard. And if you give us a rectangle, we paint it black, put some white lines on it, drill some holes, and put 2 sort of futsal-sized nets on either end, so that soccer becomes the recess activity or after school or summertime activity for the kids. And it's just nicer than using your book bag for a goalpost.
Yeah.
So I'm very passionate about that. We've done work all throughout our region. I live very close to central Portland. We've done projects in Washington State, which is across the Columbia River. We've done it in counties. Some of these courts take me 45 minutes on the freeway to get to. So we've really spread our reach. And that, to me, I don't know. It just makes me really proud. I think our proudest achievement as a soccer community has been our support of the Portland Thorns, the women's team,
Yes.
which for a while was, for several years, in fact, had the largest attendance of any women's professional club, any sport, any country.
Wow.
A woman, I'm not going to remember her name, but she's written 2 books. And one is about women's professional soccer. And she came to Portland to speak at our great bookstore, Powell's, and said that there isn't a woman playing professional soccer on earth who has not heard of the Portland Thorns. And, now the NWSL, the Women's League, is growing, and there are women's team playing in soccer-specific stadia that are slightly larger than ours. So some of those clubs are drawing crowds similar. But, if you look at Man United women, Barcelona women, PSG women, they're playing in subsidiary stadiums that seat 5,000. So even though the quality of play is obviously the world standard, the crowds are finite. Nadine Angerer, the German national goalkeeper and captain, 2-time player of the year, FIFA player of the year, before women were eligible for a Ballon d'Or. She played here in her last seasons as a pro and retired here. And she's given interviews around the world saying, I've played in World Cups and not seen crowds that Portland gets for an ordinary match on a Saturday night. So I'm very proud of that. But the OPI, the Operation Pitch Invasion work that we've done one day I was bringing some friends who were visiting town out to dinner, and we drove by one of the schools where I had built a court. And I said, I want to show you something. And we pulled up at this thing, and there's a match going, and it's a bunch of Latino women, anywhere from 15 to 30-ish years old, and some of them clearly in their work clothes. It's about 5-6 p.m. on a summer night.
Yeah.
And you can see like they put on their soccer shoes, but they're dressed as if for the workplace. And it was just an ordinary evening kick-around pickup game. And I was just so proud that we had built this thing in this community. The Timbers Army used its muscle, its might, its recognition by authorities as a legitimate social community in Portland. And we had given the city something that would be here for decades. So, that sort of stuff keeps me going, even when the results on the field are deplorable.
It really is wonderful. That is something that, like you say, it's tangible. It's changing lives. It's changing communities, and it's going to, like you say, have an impact for a really, really long time to come.
Yeah.
So, how do you raise all the money to fund it all?
Well, we have the 107ist, the sort of organization, the machinery behind the Timbers Army. It's a paid member organization. The number's around 4,000 to 6,000 people, sometimes as high as 8, sometimes under 4. That's $25 a year. So there's 100 to 150 grand that they have. And we sell our own merchandise. One of the things that the Timbers Army did that was unique at the time was we created a scarf, the No Pity scarf, the classic, it's a green bar scarf that says No Pity on one side and Timbers Army on the other. And we've sold, I don't know, upwards of 75,000 of those over the years.
Wow.
But we do have other products that are sold. I mean, if the No Pity van people, the merchandise people, announce that they have a limited edition item that's going to be up for sale, warehouse sale this Saturday, there'll be a line, sometimes overnight, and they raise money that goes directly to the 107ist, and we get money from the 107ist. We get money, not a lot, money from the Portland Youth Soccer Association, which is tasked with growing the game. And then on very big projects, we have coordinated with the Timbers and Thorns front office.
Oh, wow.
On these projects that run $100,000, we can't raise that. But we are the boots on the ground. We are the contractors. We are the people who know people in the community that the Timbers and Thorns can't reach. So if I put out on the OPI social media, hey, we're looking for something in this community, can people there send us recommendations on where we could build? I'll hear something, whereas the Timbers and Thorns would have to go to the authorities
Right.
and
Yes. Yeah.
into
Yeah.
an agenda. And it often turns out like we reached out to a new community, and I found out that, oh well, there are two primary intermediate schools, sort of 11 to 14-year-olds.
Mm.
One is in the Anglo section of town, one is in the Latino section of town. The Anglo kids have all the advantages. So when we went there, I said, where is the need? Never mind where is the land. Where is the
Yeah.
need?
Yeah.
Like, oh, if you're going to build in a Latino neighborhood.
Mm.
So that was something the Timbers Army can do that the Timbers and Thorns can't. But they can wrangle the money. So
Right.
they can go,
Yes.
to their sponsors. They can go to 6 sponsors and say, hey, chip in 15, 20 grand, and boom, like that. And then when we have a ribbon cutting, we have a tiny megaphone. They have a big megaphone. So they get all the news crews out there and, city officials. If it was just us, the people who helped us might show up. But, the Timbers will send, players, and there'll be a ribbon cutting and autograph session. And it just becomes another sort of event. But the logo of the 107ist, our Independent Supporters Trust, is a triangle. And the triangle, in my mind, is Team Town Timbers Army, or Team Town Terrace, or Team Town Tribe.
Nice. Yeah.
And we need the team. We have a lot of beef with the team, but we need the team. They raise our profile. They help us be a visible presence in the world. They help us raise money. They provide money. We had trouble when we first started doing the blacktops in schoolyards with the school district.
Mm.
And they wouldn't take us seriously. And finally, I went to the club, to the president of business operations, and said, do you have any connections at the school district? And a week later, I was meeting with the superintendent of schools, whose assistant had brushed off 30 emails from me previously. So it's a true symbiosis.
That's fantastic. What a fantastic club that they are to do that as well, and what a fantastic group you guys are to facilitate that. But getting into the football, or into the soccer. So what are your favorite memories of the Timbers over the years?
Oh man, we had, of course, we won our MLS Cup. I see you got a star on your kit in Columbus on the road as underdogs, with a goal in the 27th second. Diego Valeri, the goalkeeper, was trying to clear the ball, and he just slid into the box, and the keeper hit him, and the ball went into the net. There are photographs of me. I was leading the chants, and a guy was coming to tell me, okay, here's how we're going to organize security, so keep an eye out for this. And I'm like screaming out of my head, and he's got his back to me. He's trying to instruct me, and then there's a series of photos where he turns around and he sees what's happening, and he goes like this. So that's got to rank up there. When we were a minor league team drawing 5,000-6,000 people, our then mascot, Timber Jim Serrell, lost his daughter in an automobile accident during a match. He was called away. No one knew. And then a couple of weeks later, when we had learned about it, we started a new scarf dedicated to a sort of trust fund, a collegiate fund for his granddaughter. His daughter left behind. Her mother and father were killed in the accident, but she was not in the car.
Yeah.
And Jim was so touched by this that he came up in front of the crowd, and where the capos would usually stand, with his granddaughter, and led us in singing "You Are My Sunshine," which was his favorite lullaby. And we are singing and weeping, and the Timbers score a fucking goal. And that's an immortal moment. And now we sing it in the 80th minute of every match, because that's when it happened. And we have a series of historic sunshine goals, as we call them, goals scored while we are singing that song. And you think, how is that possible? But I'm telling you, there are like, in 18 years, there are probably 9 or 10 of them. That's a lot for 80th minute during a specific chant.
Yeah.
In one of them, it was the last match we played at home before MLS. So it was the last minor league match. Jim asked everybody to bring a sunflower. During You Are My Sunshine, thousands of people were holding up sunflowers.
Oh,
Ryan Poor of the Timbers scored, so smoke went up, as we do.
yeah.
So I have images, because I was up front. I was a capo at the time.
Oh,
I took images of a crowd of thousands of people with sunflowers in smoke, green and yellow smoke. So any sunshine goal. And the most electric sports thing I've ever seen was when we hosted MLS Cup final here in 2021, pardon me. We played terribly, and the game went into, we were down 1-0 on a chippy goal by New York. Brutal storm conditions, freezing cold, high winds, pissing down rain, and it got to be the 94th minute, the 95th minute. In something like the 98th minute, we scored and leveled the match and sent it into added time. And I was with my partner. I was in the stands with my friends in the spot where I've been for 20 years at that point.
yeah.
Weeping and laughing, hugging everybody.
Oh,
We were soaked and miserable, and suddenly we were in a cloud of ecstasy. And we have a chant that we stole from Panathinaikos. I'm saying that wrong, but you know the club. The Greek,
I know the one. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, the Greek club. And we call it the Greek chant, or North End noise. And it's a very elaborate chant with call and response and very wordy. And it took years for us to get the crowd to truly sing it. Now it's a beloved chant. The stadium was packed that day, 25,000. And we started singing that after that goal and into the extra time. And I could tell from where I was that the entire stadium, not just the Timbers Army, but there were people in every portion of the ground who knew the chant and were singing, because they were doing the gestures of the call and response in time with us, and doing the clapping and the jumping in. And even now I have goosebumps remembering that. So I'd say Diego Valeri, 27-second goal, any sunshine goal, and Felipe Mora's game-tying goal in MLS Cup. And then I'll sacrifice the rest of the Timbers history.
They are incredible stories. You are quite a prolific writer and author. Have you written about the Timbers?
I've written about the Timbers on social media, hundreds of thousands probably of posts on message boards, which, thanks be to Christ, have disappeared, because not only I would be canceled, tarred, feathered, and burned out of history. I used to drink and had a potty mouth. I still have the potty mouth. But I've written for the Timbers official website. The first year that we were in the CONCACAF Champions League, we drew a team in Guyana, which is the only English language speaking country on the South American continent. And I was sent along to that. And the cost of my ticket was to write a piece for timbers.com. I've written about the history of our chanting and songs for the 107ist blog. I've thought about writing about football and my personal connection to the game and about Timbers. And it's just never the right time, never the right subject. I have ideas. I've talked it over with my agent. I'm still at a phase of my life where I need to pay for groceries and gasoline. So I have to be, I could perhaps write a good book on this subject, but I don't know if I could write one that I would be paid well enough to stop my other work to do.
Well, maybe that should be a fundraising effort. We'll kickstart something.
I've had daffier ideas come to fruition. So
I would certainly be interested in buying that. With the stories you've just told, those three are incredible stories. So yeah, I think that would go very, very well. So tell us more about the nitty gritty, the rivalry with the Sounders.
It's really a perfect storm. By American standards, the two cities are very close together. It's about a 3-hour drive, and the next closest team is another 4 hours drive beyond that. And after that, you're talking about Los Angeles or Salt Lake City, which is, you have to fly there. So I know by European standards, a 3-hour drive, you can go from, practically from the Scottish border to London. But, for us, it's actually quite proximate. And it's just, it's a true derby. I mean, there are differences in the cultures that, of course, we're kindred cities, and you must be, by the way, for there to be bad blood. You can't have bad blood. I don't have beef with anyone in Florida. I'd wish they'd fall into the ocean, but it's not a rivalry. So you have to have that sort of sibling aspect to it, and enough similarities that you can really emphasize the differences. And when we came to minor league soccer together in the aughts, Seattle was there a couple of years before us, and just as they were in MLS a couple of seasons before us. And we started out, there were 20 of them and 30, 40 of us, and every year there would be 20 of them and 130 of us, and 20 of them and 450 of us, and 20 of them and 1,200 of us. And it dawned on me that we were just different cultures. They were very like, this is how it's done. This is how we do it. We chant this song at this time. This is how you dress. This is how you comport yourself. And the Timbers Army was like, wow, cool. You're from Bosnia? Do you know any Bosnian chants we can do? Oh man, somebody got the idea that we're all going to wear headbands to the next match. And it was much more Portland grassroots, non-corporate, anti-corporate even. And it just, I always say, if I could pick a group of people to be stranded, in a desert or on a deserted island with, I would choose that original Timbers Army, because we had musicians and journalists and lawyers and a political lobbyist and artists and a beer guy and a couple of hard men. I mean, it was just sort of the perfect complex of people. So the fan groups, Seattle was granted an MLS franchise, and overnight they had 30,000 people in a stadium, all with the same shirt and scarf, all in that color green. I always compare it to a chia pet. It was empty. We used to go to Seattle, and there would be 75 Timbers Army, and we would drown them out in their own ground, 75 of us. Now, when the two teams play one another, thousands make the trip. They have to open up the top portion of their NFL stadium to accommodate the crowd that the Timbers Army brings. We were traveling with like 30 buses.
Wow.
And, it being Portland, each bus was given a gift of a keg from a different Portland brewery. So you could say, oh, I'm on the double barrel bus. Well, I'm on the Widmer bus. I'm on the...
Fantastic.
But there is a real sporting rivalry, and there always has been. You talk to the guys, the veterans of the 75 team, and they were like, those were always the chippy matches. It didn't make a difference. Diego Valeri, our talismanic Argentine forward, who retired a couple of seasons ago, the most gentle man I've ever known. I mean, he'll cut your throat on the field, but then he'll pick you up and say a prayer for you. He would say, I don't like him. And he had an Argentine former teammate playing for Seattle. And like during those 90 minutes, nope, it's off. And, it's a truly passionate rivalry. There's a subset of the Timbers Army that identifies as aces, any club except Seattle. And it's any sport. Seattle has an NBA team, an NHL hockey team, and a gridiron football team, and Portland fans will not root for any of them.
No, quite right too. Yeah, it should extend.
I won't.
Absolutely.
They had a baseball player I was very fond of. At one point, he was traded, and I was like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm done rooting for anyone in a Seattle uniform in any game."
Absolutely right. Absolutely. It's proper. It's history, and that's what matters. So, you mentioned Valeri there. Any other particular favorites over the years?
Well, you can't talk about the one Diego without the other Diego. Diego Chara, a freak of nature. He's 37. He logged more minutes for us last season than anyone else. when he was signed to the club in 2011, he's now in his 14th year with us. I was told by management, we've got this guy coming from Colombia who covers more ground in the final 30 minutes than in the first 30 or the second 30 minutes. And I was like, oh, so technically he's just getting warmed up when the final whistle blows. And as of 3 or 4 years ago, the last time I asked someone about it, that statistic was still true of him. He's the all-time MLS leader in yellow cards, but he's only ever been shown a second yellow card once. Wow. Which means that he knows where that edge is.
Yeah, the discipline. Yeah.
And on the Timbers website a couple of years ago, somebody showed just an ordinary early season match, I believe against Dallas. They were like, I'm going to show you like 12 things Diego Chara did that there's no way of quantifying. Like just moving to a place where he made a pass undesirable. So where Dallas would have had a chance maybe for a long ball and a breakaway, he just moved in such a way that the guy had to think about it. And in that time, he'd be shut down, or sometimes taking the foul, just, saying this is, you have to stop this. So you can't not have a conversation about him. I have a shirt that I made one night on Etsy for myself. It says Clive, or Clive Charles, from the original Timbers, Clive and the ampersand Byron, Byron Alvarez of the minor league Timbers, and Diego.
Oh, fantastic.
And I always think of the two Diegos. I know which is which because the Diego with the ampersand would be Valeri, the great assist maker, and the Diego with the period is Chara, the great stopper.
Perfect.
And then in the minor leagues, again, these are guys who stuck around in Portland and have made an impact in the community, even though the team they played for disappeared and they didn't rise up with us. Scott Thompson, a talismanic defender from the minor league era. He had his, he was a player with a chant. He introduced himself one time as Scott with one T, so that became the chant. SCOT, Scott with one T. And Byron Alvarez, who was just this joyous forward. He had been in MLS sides and he was constantly cut. He would play for us. That guy, he at least twice in the minor leagues he scored with his first touch, and then like ran up to the stands. So those are the guys who stand out for me. But we've been blessed. We've had good goalkeepers over the years. We've had good managers mostly in MLS. Caleb Porter and Gio Savarese. We have Phil Neville now. This is an experiment I'm dubious about, but I'll be watching.
That was exactly my next point. So thank you for leading me on to it. I mean, there isn't a huge amount complimentary you can say about his track record so far, but could this be where he finds success? The bar is relatively low. We failed to make the playoffs. I believe last year, maybe the year before. If we were in the year before, we had one game and it was on the road and we were knocked out. Deadline day last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was a shame that we had. We let Gio Savarese go. The guy who subbed for him, his assistant, had a terrific run, and then he lost his last 3 matches. If he had taken 2 points from those 3 matches, we would have been over the line. The expectations are middling. We haven't finished the transfer window yet. We still are missing a few pieces. We have Copa America coming. We're going to be missing a lot of pieces during that. He carries some off the pitch baggage as well. We're a fan base and a city with social justice as a priority, and he had a kind of unfortunate series of social media posts back in the day. He's apologized for them verbally. I don't know if he's made any kind of other reparations around them. So he came in under a cloud. We're still reeling here from the sex scandal around the Thorns.
Yeah.
So the timing of that was, it's just kind of tone deaf. You had to find a manager who had that baggage. So he has a lot to prove. So in a certain sense, even modest success would be, success.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we've been we've been in 3 MLS Cups since, finals since 2015, and we've enjoyed some real success under different managers and different styles of play. So there is some expectation, and the stadium is usually packed. So there's a hunger for quality. And by the way, the Thorns have 3 stars over their badge.
Wow.
So when you're getting run out of your own ground by the women's team, the expectations are defensively high. And I don't know if he's the guy.
Yeah, let's reserve judgment for now. But for me, the big guy when I think of Timbers is Evander. But
Yes.
Who are the most important players, and where do you need to maybe improve, do you think?
Well, we've had a couple of guys coming back from injury. Eric Williamson, who's sort of somewhere between Evander's position and Chara's position, sort of mainly a defensive midfielder, central defensive midfielder, but he has the skills to go forward, quite often does, but he's recovering now from his 2nd torn ACL. And he's a young man. It remains to be seen. We leaked goals last year, but we seem to have found a good solution in the back line. And we really, the attack is weak. Felipe Mora, the Chilean, a terrific goal scorer. I just had a vibe about this guy. Last year, I did some of the numbers, and, he has scored something like, I'm not going to have the numbers right, but this is the gist of it, is that he's got something like 30 goals for the Timbers, and they've directly resulted in like 57 points. Like, he only scores game winners or game tying goals.
Yeah.
He's kind of spectacular in that way, and getting him back is a big plus. But he needs a striker partner, someone up there with him. The midfield looks solid. We've signed new goalkeepers. We've always been fortunate there. Evander is still enigmatic. I love these guys who, just had 16 beers and say, he's lazy. It's like, mate, I see you huffing and puffing, walking up the stairs to leave the stadium. I guarantee you, if we put a tracker on that guy, he's just run 7 miles with people hitting him.
Yeah.
And, he's lazy in the sense that you see this in other sports. It comes easy to him. So, if he's not straining, people, I've paid money. I want to see a guy, blow a hamstring. It's like, there's Harry Pearson, the wonderful UK football writer, talks about if the players followed the advice of the fans in the stands, by the 20th minute there would be 11 red cards and there would be no balls left to play with, because they would all been wellied out of the stadium.
It's so true. It really is true.
So I'm fond of Evander, and I think he showed a lot, and I hope he finds it's hard to. He's enigmatic. It's hard to read him. He looks sour sometimes, and we have Diego Chara, who's smiles like the Cheshire Cat, and Diego Valeri, who was just this sort of angelic presence on the field. So to have Evander step up and be the face of the franchise, it's a little disconcerting. It's hard to know what the guy is. Where he's coming from sometimes, but I think he's a quality player.
Fantastic, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think real standouts you've got in that team there. One of the reasons I was so excited to get you on, because I mean, obviously, Timbers Army. I've read quite a lot of the stuff that you've had on the site, and like you said, the sort of social justice action. I remember reading that a long while ago when that was a thing, and the actions for the Thorns and the Timbers, acting together, and it's been a fan base which, ever since I've been looking into MLS, it's come up time and time again. It came up, scored really highly on a survey that I did of teams, and who do you think another team's fans are, who are really, really good? And the Timbers came up time and time again. It seems to have something special. I think whether it's that community or passion or spirit or something. And can you put a finger on what it is specifically, or is it a mixture of things and a type of person?
It's a mixture of things. It's small d democratic. We've always been like, if someone shows up with an idea, great. Likewise, if someone, like me, who's been around a while, gives up a responsibility, the people who follow it up will add to it and often go back to that person, say, hey, is it cool? We're changing this, so there's like a mutual respect. There's Portland is a DIY creative hub. We don't have any, Oregon doesn't have very many Fortune 500 level companies. Nike is one. But it's home to a lot of animators, comic book makers, graphic designers, musicians, poets. So creating is part of the culture here, and that just bled into the Timbers Army. It was, we used to have a season kickoff party the night before the home opener that was all bands, and every single one of the bands was someone that you definitely knew from the Timbers Army was in it, and that was who we were. But at the same time, we respected the 1975 era Timbers. There's a banner that hangs behind the drums in the north end, and it's of a woman knitting. And that's Giselle Currier. One of our initiatives is the Giselle Currier Memorial Scholarship. Giselle was a super fan back in the 70s. I got to know her in the aughts. She died in between our first and second home matches in MLS. Very suddenly took ill and passed in her parents' living room. But back in the minor league days, before the Timbers Army storefront was a thing, Giselle was the one who had the scarves. Everyone would come up to you and say, where do I get a scarf? And we said, Giselle, you're always sitting right here. We'll make the scarves a round number and cost, I think it was $8 at the time. Now it's 10. And, we'll just give you a package of scarves every match. And, we'll just tell people Giselle's always in the same seat. So her banner hangs over her seat, which is the only reserved seat in the supporter section.
Fantastic.
Giselle was a church lady. And everyone who wanted to be like Timbers Army and represent with that scarf had to meet the church lady. And people would say, after she passed, I don't know how many people told me, she never forgot my name. She never forgot, like, I had a son in college in Florida. She never forgot that, I went to such and such high school. And that was the thing. You would hang out with the hooligans, but if you wanted a scarf, you had to go to the church lady. And that seems to me echt Timbers Army. I think our tifos are the best. I'm always surprised by them. Back to the minor leagues when we did, stuff that it's not necessarily about we will crush our enemies. And, it looks like a Frank Frazetta comic from the 70s or a heavy metal album jacket. It's about celebrating what's joyous about our culture. And one thing that we do, and we've done every year now for about 15, 20 years, is on the last scheduled home match, so last match of the regular season, we do a tifo, and every player has an individual 2-stick banner made for them. So one year it was Legos, one year it was tarot cards, one year it was Simpsons. And when the players are coming off the pitch, they're given this banner that represents them. And we've seen photos over the years of guys who've been here 6-7 years, and their den or their garage is filled with these images of themselves painted.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that's the Team Town Timbers Army. Yeah, you might bring 25, 30,000 people on game day and be loud on 2 or 3 chants, but we are here 365, and we are in the community. We're building stuff. The players, know us and come out. We used to get in trouble when Diego Valeri was in town. There are very strict rules about players having X number of appearances that they can make officially for the club in outside functions, charity events, community events, what have you.
Yeah.
And I think they have to do 3 a year and no more. And they have a representative from the club along with them. And we would do some sort of fundraiser for my project or some other Timbers Army team event. And Diego Valeri and his family would show up, and the representative of the club is like, what? You come over and like be all upset. What is he doing here? What is he doing here? I'm like, dude, he lives in Portland. He sees the social media. Should we throw him out? It's like he's knit into the community, and that's what we have that's special and grassroots, and I think unique to Portland, but not it could be reproduced elsewhere, but it has to be done from the bottom up. If it's something that the club does, sponsors do, it can be spectacular, but it won't be as long-lived. It's the difference between growing something and buying a potted plant. We believe in growing from the seeds. One day, a kid who grew up playing on one of the courts that I and my team have built is going to score a meaningful goal in that stadium, a timber or a thorn. And I'm going to chariot out of the stadium into heaven like the prophet Elijah. We'll be done. And respect to anyone else who's doing that. I don't see it in MLS. I think the potential is there in some other cities, and I hope they succeed at it.
That's absolutely fantastic. You're so poetic when you would talk about these things. I absolutely love it. Thank you. So where can people, if they want to support you, if they want to find out more, what are the links? Where should people go to?
Timbersarmy.org. There's links there to Operation Pitch Invasion. We're always looking for a couple of bucks. We can make it work. You can also see the Giselle's Career Scholarship Fund that every year outfits a bunch of high school teams with new uniforms, provides goals, scholarships to kids to go to, worthy young athletes, boys or girls, to go to, advanced level camps, which can be very expensive. And then, the Timbers social media. I'm no longer on the platform once known as Twitter, but the hashtag RCTID for Rose City Till I Die is still very active. The Timbers subreddit on Reddit, where, in those places when I do post, which is very rarely, it's under my name. I'm often posting about traditions and histories. So I'm writing up little stories there, or, digging at people, but not in a way that's going to get me thrown out of Portland.
I'll make sure I'll post this video there, then I'll make sure I get into that subreddit and put it in.
Yeah, and I'm at ShawnLevy.com, and links to all my books, and quite, I think there are videos of my OPI work somewhere on that site as well.
Fantastic. I'll put all those links down below as well. But Shawn, thank you so much. I think it's been a really long-awaited one for me to get somebody in from the Timbers Army, and you've been absolutely perfect. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Well, thank you so much for your interest, and fuck shittle, as we say.
Fantastic.